The icy North Atlantic wind whipped across the deck of the HMCS Haida, a tribal-class destroyer slicing through the black waves under a moonless sky in late 1942. Seaman Liam Thompson, the ship's unassuming cook from Halifax, Nova Scotia, gripped the railing with calloused hands, his woolen cap pulled low against the spray that stung like needles. Alarms blared from the bridge, red lights flashing as the convoy of merchant ships, 40 strong, carrying vital supplies from Canada to Britain, zigzagged in desperate evasion. German U-boats, those silent wolf packs, lurked beneath the surface, their torpedoes hungry for the 200 souls aboard. Liam's stomach churned, not from the seasickness that plagued him on rough nights, but from the acrid smell of diesel fumes mixing with the salt air, a harbinger of the chaos to come. He could hear the distant thrum of propellers, feel the deck shudder as the Haida's engines roared to full speed. Fear clawed at his chest. He'd joined the Royal Canadian Navy to serve his country, not to stare death in the face amid the endless gray. Yet, in that moment, as depth charges rumbled from the destroyer's stern, exploding in geysers of foam, Liam's mind raced, not with panic, but with a wild, improbable idea born from his days charting safe paths through Halifax's foggy harbors. The wolf packs were closing in, their periscopes slicing the waves like shark fins, and the convoy's straight-line formation was a death sentence. If you want more stories of Canadian bravery and WW2, subscribe and hit like, so their sacrifices are never forgotten. In the dim glow of the galley below decks, Liam had always been the steady one, a 28-year-old with a mop of sandy hair and a quiet demeanor that hid a sharp tactical mind honed from years as a fisherman before the war. The Haida, part of Canada's vital contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic, was one of 8 destroyers escorting this convoy, RCX-42, loaded with tanks, food, and ammunition that could tip the scales against the Axis. Canada, thrust into the fray since declaring war in 1939, had committed over 100 warships to protect these lifelines, their sailors enduring months at sea in freezing conditions to counter the U-boat menace that had already sunk hundreds of Allied vessels. Liam's comrades were a tight-knit bunch. Captain Elias Ford, a stern veteran from Vancouver, with a scar across his cheek from the Dieppe raid. Lieutenant Noah Campbell, the young gunnery officer whose quick wit masked his homesickness for his farm in Saskatchewan. And Petty Officer Ethan Roberts, the burly engineer who treated the engines like his own children. They shared smokes during rare lulls, swapping stories of sweethearts back home. Liam's was a red-haired girl named Margaret, waiting in Halifax with a promise ring. But tension simmered like a pot on the boil. Intelligence reports whispered of Admiral Dunnitz's wolf packs massing, up to 20 submarines shadowing from the mid-Atlantic. The Haida's crew, 250 strong, felt the weight. Rations were tight, morale frayed by false alarms and the constant dread of a torpedo strike. Liam, stirring stew in the galley, overheard the officers' hushed debates on the bridge. Standard convoy maneuvers weren't enough against the wolves' coordinated attacks. Something terrible loomed, a sense that this crossing would test them beyond breaking, as the first pings of ASDIC echoed through the hull like a countdown to doom. As the convoy pushed into the Wolfpack's hunting grounds off the Grand Banks, the night erupted into pandemonium. It was November 14, 1942, and the U-552, a notorious Type 7C submarine commanded by Eric Topp, had slipped through the escort's screen, its torpedoes streaking silently toward the unprotected flanks. The first explosion rocked the merchant ship SS Montrose, a Canadian freighter laden with wheat, sending flames skyward in a roar that drowned out the screams. Liam, roused from his bunk by the jolt, scrambled topside, the ship listing as shrapnel whistled past. "Man overboard!" Ethan Roberts bellowed, pointing to dark figures flailing in the oil-slicked water, their cries lost to the gale. Confusion reigned, the convoy scattered, lights blazing in panic against blackout orders, painting perfect targets. Noah Campbell manned the 4-inch guns, barking coordinates as the Haida unleashed a barrage, but the wolves were elusive, diving deep to evade the depth charges that bubbled the sea like boiling tar. Liam, no fighter by trade, hauled ammo crates with the deckhands, his hands raw and bleeding, heart pounding with the raw fear of annihilation. Reports crackled over the radio. 3 more ships hit, 200 men now at the mercy of the deep, their lives hanging by the thread of evasive action. Captain Ford paced the bridge, sweat beading under his cap, weighing the impossible: hold formation and risk total loss, or break and invite pursuit. The air thickened with smoke and cordite, the taste of blood and salt on Liam's lips as he glimpsed a periscope's wake mere yards away. Real terror gripped him then. the kind that whispered of watery graves, of Margaret's letters going unanswered. In the midst of it, as another torpedo grazed the Haida's hull with a grinding screech, Liam's mind flashed to his old fishing charts, zigzags that outfoxed storms. But voicing it now, amid the dying, felt like madness. The suffering intensified as dawn broke gray and unforgiving, the wolf pack pressing their advantage with relentless fury. U-516 joined the fray, circling like predators, their acoustic torpedoes homing in on the destroyer's screws. The Haida shuddered under a near miss, bulkheads groaning as water flooded a compartment, trapping two sailors who pounded futilely on the hatch. Liam, pressed into damage control, waded through knee-deep icy bilge, the stench of fuel and fear choking him. "We can't keep this up," Noah shouted over the din, his face smeared with soot, eyes wild with exhaustion. Hard decisions tore at the crew. Abandon the sinking Montrose to save the convoy, or risk all in rescue? Captain Ford chose the latter, ordering the Haida to veer perilously close, lifeboats swinging wildly in the swells. Liam manned a breeches buoy line, pulling frostbitten survivors aboard one by one, their uniforms shredded, bodies trembling from hypothermia. But loss mounted. Ethan Roberts took shrapnel to the leg while sealing a breach, collapsing with a curse, his blood staining the deck crimson. The pain was visceral, a symphony of agony. The crack of gunfire, the wail of the wounded. The relentless pounding of waves against the hull. Suspense coiled like a spring. Radio chatter from other escorts painted a grim picture. 6 ships down, wolves regrouping for a daylight strike. Liam's fear crested, visions of his family's farm in Nova Scotia blurring with the spray, the certainty of death pressing in. Yet in that nadir, as the Haida dodged another salvo, Liam caught Ford's eye and blurted his crazy notion, a radical zigzag pattern, erratic and unpredictable, drawn from his harbor navigation days, to throw off the U-boat's fire control solutions. Ridiculed at first, it hung in the air like a lifeline amid the chaos. The climax built to a fever pitch as the Wolfpack, sensing vulnerability, launched a coordinated assault at midday, torpedoes fanning out in a deadly fan. The Haida, battered but defiant, became the convoy's shield, her guns blazing in defiance. Ford, seizing on Liam's desperate pitch, barked orders to implement the zigzag, sharp, irregular turns that mimicked a drunkard's path, defying naval doctrine. If you're still here with him in this moment, subscribe. So their courage lives on. Chaos reigned supreme. U-552 surfaced briefly in frustration, raked by Haida's pom-poms in a fireworks burst, but not before a torpedo clipped a tanker, igniting an inferno that lit the horizon. Liam, at his station, felt the ship lurch through the maneuvers, G-forces slamming him against rails, the world a blur of foam and fire. In an explosive twist, as the pattern took hold, the wolves' aim faltered, their calculated shots missing by yards, buying precious time. But victory teetered. Ethan lay pale in sick bay, whispering of home, while Noah spotted a new periscope trail closing fast. The cost was etched in every face, the war's bitter toll mounting, yet Liam's unorthodox gambit sparked a fragile hope amid the storm. As the afternoon wore on, the zigzag pattern began to weave its unpredictable magic across the churning Atlantic, the HMCS Haida leading the remnants of Convoy RCX-42 in a dance that baffled the Wolfpack's calculations. Captain Elias Ford, his voice hoarse from shouting orders over the gale, gripped the bridge railings as the destroyer carved sharp angles through the swells, first starboard, then a sudden port veer, then an erratic loop that sent unsecured gear sliding across decks. Liam Thompson, back in the galley after his damage control shift, braced against the violent motions, ladling hot broth for the wounded with trembling hands. The air still reeked of burning oil from the tanker inferno, an acrid reminder of the 4 ships already lost, their crews' fates sealed in the cold embrace of the sea. But the U-boats faltered. Eric Topp's U-552, frustrated by the convoy's erratic path, fired wildly, her torpedoes slicing harmlessly into empty waves or detonating against foam. Cheers erupted sporadically from the crew, ragged and disbelieving. As ASDIC pings grew fainter, the wolves forced to dive and regroup. Noah Campbell, wiping sweat from his brow at the gun turret, exchanged a grim nod with Liam during a brief respite. The pattern was working, buying hours that could mean survival. Yet the cost lingered like a shadow. Ethan Roberts, bandaged and feverish in the sick bay, muttered deliriously about his wife in Toronto, his leg wound a stark emblem of the war's indiscriminate bite. The convoy, now down to 36 vessels carrying the precious 200 men and their cargo, pressed on toward the safety of the eastern seaboard, but exhaustion clawed at every soul. Ford's decision to trust a cook's hunch had shifted the tide, yet the ocean whispered warnings. No victory was absolute in these waters. With the sun dipping low, painting the horizon in bloodied hues, the Haida's crew pushed through the grueling maneuvers, their bodies aching from the relentless G-forces and the chill that seeped into bones like a curse. Liam moved among the men, distributing rations with quiet encouragement, his fisherman's instincts now validated in the heat of battle. "Kept us one step ahead, Tomo." Petty Officer Jack Wilson clapped him on the shoulder, a newcomer from Ottawa whose steady aim had downed a lurking aircraft spotter earlier. The escorts coordinated via flickering signal lamps. The Zigzag adopted fleet-wide as word spread from the Haida's radio bursts, Captain Ford crediting his anonymous deckhand's genius to maintain morale without revealing Liam's role. But suffering hadn't ended. Hypothermia claimed 2 more from the Montrose survivors, their blue-lipped faces haunting the mess hall where Liam served silent meals. Noah, his hands blistered from loading shells, confided in Liam during a smoke break below decks. "Thought we'd be fish food by noon. Your idea. It's mad, but it's us alive." Emotional bonds strained under the weight. Letters from home, clutched like talismans, spoke of normalcy that felt worlds away, while the fear of another Wolfpack ambush gnawed persistently. U-516, damaged but vengeful, trailed at a distance, her commander cursing the Canadian ghosts, evading his sights. The Haida's engine strained, fuel gauges dipping perilously low, forcing Ford into another hard call. Ration speed or risk stranding the convoy. Liam overheard the debate, his heart sinking at the mention of potential abandonment, the war's bitter calculus turning comrades into numbers. As night fell again, stars piercing the smoke veil, a fragile calm settled, punctuated only by the lap of waves and the distant cry of gulls, harbingers of land or just cruel tease? The resolution unfolded in the pre-dawn hours of November 15th, as the convoy crested the final swell before air cover from Newfoundland bases, the zigzag pattern holding firm against sporadic U-boat probes. Ford's voice crackled over the intercom, steady for the first time in days. "All hands, we've shaken the wolves. Homeward bound." Relief washed over the Haida like a balm, sailors embracing on deck, tears mixing with salt water as the first Allied patrol planes droned overhead, their depth charges echoing in triumphant punctuation. Liam, emerging topside with a pot of coffee, watched the merchant ships reform in loose order, their hulls scarred but buoyant, the 200 lives preserved through sheer audacity. Ethan Roberts, stabilized by the medic's grim arts, cracked a weak smile from his bunk, vowing to buy Liam a pint in Halifax. Noah Campbell tallied the toll, 6 ships sunk, over 300 souls lost, but the bulk of the convoy intact, tanks and supplies destined for the front lines. Canada's role in the Battle of the Atlantic, often overshadowed by grander Allied narratives, shown here. The Haida and her sisters, humble destroyers from Esquimalt and Halifax shipyards, had turned the tide with homegrown grit. Yet the emotional consequences lingered, a somber undercurrent to the cheers. Liam thought of Margaret, her letters now symbols of a future reclaimed, but the faces of the drowned haunted his quiet moments. The war's theft of innocence, leaving scars deeper than any torpedo gash. Ford gathered the officers on the bridge, a rare toast with watered rum. To the unsung, we live because one man thought differently. Pride swelled, but realism tempered it. The Atlantic remained a graveyard, and this victory was but a reprieve in an endless fight. In the aftermath, as the Haida limped into St. John's Harbor under gray skies, the crew disembarked to the wail of bagpipes and the cheers of dock workers, their uniforms stiff with salt and blood. Liam Thompson, medal pinned discreetly to his chest by Ford's own hand, felt the weight of survival, a quiet hero amid the fanfare, his zigzag pattern already whispered in naval briefings as a tactical evolution. Who survived and who was lost etched permanent lines on their faces. Ethan would walk with a limp, a purple heart his consolation. Noah penned letters home with steadier hand, his farm dreams intact. But losses like the Montrose's captain, a old salt from PEI named Samuel Hughes, cut deep, his final radio plea for aid replaying in nightmares. The war's emotional toll manifested in hushed conversations over pints at the local Legion. Guilt for the dead, relief for the living, a collective resolve hardened like steel. Liam stared at the harbor waves, the same that had nearly claimed him, pondering the fragility of it all. Canada's sons, far from prairies and coasts, remaking the sea's rules to defy death. Bitter realism settled in, celebrations faded, replaced by the grind of refits and new patrols, the promise of more wolves waiting in the deep. Yet as Liam boarded a train back to Halifax for leave, a cryptic wireless message from Naval Command crackled through the station speakers. U-5I-52, presumed sunk in the fray, had vanished without trace, her logs hinting at a Canadian defector aboard, a secret that could unravel the Haida's triumph or ignite a deeper conspiracy. Liam Thompson stared out the grimy window of the CNR train rattling toward Halifax, the maritime landscape blurring into a monotonous gray under the November drizzle. The cryptic wireless message from Naval Command still echoed in his mind, crackling over the station speakers like a ghost from the deep. U-552 status. Unconfirmed sinkage. Intercepted logs reference Canadian asset aboard. Priority intercept. Report discrepancies immediately. It had frozen him mid-step, his duffel bag heavy on his shoulder, as dockworkers bustled around the Haida's triumphant return. Presumed sunk in the Wolfpack skirmish, the U-boat had vanished without wreckage or oil slicks. And now this. A Canadian defector? Liam's zigzag pattern had saved the convoy. But if a traitor lurked in those shadows, it could tarnish the victory, turning heroes into suspects. His mind replayed the battle's frenzy, the Haida's erratic turns baffling Top's torpedoes, the cheers as ASDIC contacts faded. Yet doubt crept in like the fog rolling off the Bay of Fundy. Who on the Canadian side could betray them? A spy in the convoy's merchant crews, perhaps? Or worse, someone from the escorts themselves? Liam's fingers drummed on his knee, the metal pinned inside his jacket feeling like a weight rather than an honor. Margaret waited in Halifax, her letters a lifeline through the terror, but this secret gnawed at him. Reveal it and risk unraveling the crew's morale, or bury it and court greater danger? The train whistle pierced the air, a shrill warning that the war's tendrils reached even home soil. As fields gave way to the harbor's silhouette, Liam steeled himself. The Atlantic's ghosts weren't done with him yet. If you're still here with him in this unraveling mystery, subscribe, so the hidden truths of their bravery endure. In Halifax, the salt-tanged air greeted Liam like an old friend as he stepped onto the platform. The city's wartime bustle a stark contrast to the ocean's isolation. Shipyards humming with welders' torches, women in overalls riveting hulls for new destroyers. Margaret O'Brien, her red hair tied back under a scarf, spotted him first, her green eyes lighting up as she pushed through the crowd. At 25, she worked the docks as a welder, her hands calloused like his, and their embrace was fierce, laced with the unspoken fears of separation. "You made it, Liam," she whispered, pulling back to trace the new lines etched around his eyes, the faint scar from shrapnel on his cheek. Over coffee at a cramped diner near the waterfront, he shared fragments of the tale, the Wolfpack's assault, Ethan's wound, the zigzag that had them cheering like madmen, but held back the wireless intercept, its implications too volatile. Margaret sensed his reserve, her brow furrowing as she squeezed his hand. "The sea changes a man," she said softly, "but you're home now." Yet peace eluded him. That night, in their modest flat overlooking the harbor, Liam pored over a smuggled newspaper clipping about U-552's history. Top's boat, ace of aces, with a reputation for ruthless precision. The defector hint pointed to sabotage. Perhaps falsified convoy routes leaked from Canadian intelligence, explaining how the wolves had pounced so perfectly on RCX-42. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of periscopes rising in Halifax's own waters, and by dawn, a knock at the door jolted him awake. It was Lieutenant Noah Campbell, on leave himself, his face drawn under the brim of his cap. "Ford sent me," Noah said grimly, glancing at Margaret before pulling Liam aside. "That message, it's real, and it might involve one of us." The revelation hung heavy, bonds of camaraderie fracturing under suspicion's blade, as the two men slipped out into the misty streets, the war's shadow lengthening over what should have been sanctuary. Their investigation began in the underbelly of Halifax Naval Quarter, a labyrinth of warehouses and dimly lit pubs where sailors swapped rumors like contraband smokes. Noah, ever the quick-witted farm boy turned officer, had pieced together fragments from coded dispatches, the U-5A-52's logs, recovered from a drifting debris field days after the battle, mentioned Nordic ally providing real-time bearings, coordinates too accurate for guesswork, matching a Canadian radio operator's shift patterns. Liam's stomach twisted. Could it be Petty Officer Jack Wilson, the sharpshooting Ottawa lad who'd clapped him on the back post-battle, or someone higher, like a clerk in Esquimalt Command? They met with a grizzled intelligence contact, Captain Daniel Mackenzie, in a back room of the Wardroom Officers Club, the air thick with pipe smoke and the scent of aged whiskey. Mackenzie, a veteran of the Great War with a limp from Ypres, slid a dossier across the scarred table, intercepted enigma fragments hinting at a defector's motive. Ideological sympathy, perhaps a fascist sympathizer from Quebec's French enclaves, or simple greed from blackout profiteering. The Haida Zigzag threw them off, Mackenzie rasped. But if this traitor fed them the initial vector, your crazy idea was the only thing between 200 men and Davy Jones. Liam's fisherman's instincts flared. He'd navigated foggy bays by feel, and now he sketched erratic patterns on a napkin, theorizing how an insider could predict convoy paths. Tension mounted as Noah revealed a personal stake. His brother, a merchant sailor on the Montrose, had gone down with her, and vengeance burned in his eyes. "If it's one of ours, I'll see him swing," Noah muttered, fists clenched. But danger lurked. As they left, shadows shifted in the alley, a figure tailing them through the fog-shrouded docks. Paranoia gripped Liam. The defector might be watching, silencing loose ends before the truth surfaced. Margaret, waiting at home with worry lines deepening, urged caution, but the pull of duty dragged Liam deeper, the conspiracy threatening to engulf the very crew that had saved him. The climax erupted under a stormy sky 2 days later, as Liam and Noah tracked a lead to an abandoned fishery shack on the harbor's edge, where smuggled U-boat parts, dials and wiring, had washed up, bartered by black marketeers. Rain lashed the tin roof like machine gun fire, the wind howling through cracked walls as they burst in, flashlights cutting the gloom. There, hunched over a radio set crackling with static, was Samuel Hughes, or what was left of the Montrose's captain, presumed drowned. But Hughes lived, gaunt and wild-eyed, his uniform tattered, a Luger pistol trembling in his grip. "You don't understand," he rasped, backing against crates stamped with German markings. The truth spilled in a torrent. No defector on U-552, but Hughes himself, captured in the sinking and turned by Top's interrogators with promises of survival and anti-British propaganda. He'd radioed bearings from a hidden transmitter, his rescue, a ruse to embed deeper in Allied lines. Betrayal's sting hit like a depth charge. Liam lunged, tackling Hughes amid a scuffle that splintered wood and echoed with grunts. Noah wrestled the gun away, but not before a shot winged Liam's arm, blood blooming hot on his sleeve. "For the lives you cost," Noah roared, pinning the traitor as sirens wailed in the distance, naval police closing in on the tip Mackenzie had anonymously fed. Chaos peaked as Hughes lunged for the radio, smashing it in desperation, but the damage was catalogued, logs confirming his transmissions. The Zigzag's genius, the only counter to his treachery. If someone is still with them through this betrayal storm, subscribe now. Let the world remember they fought spies as fiercely as submarines. In the melee's aftermath, as MPs hauled Hughes away in chains, Liam slumped against the wall, pain throbbing, but justice a cold salve. The conspiracy unraveled, but its roots ran deep. How many more like him hid in Canada's ranks? Resolution came swiftly in the stark light of a naval inquiry room, where Captain Elias Ford testified alongside Liam and Noah, the air heavy with the scent of ink and polished oak. Hughes confessed fully, his motives crumbling under cross-examination, a mix of tortured scars and warped patriotism, claiming the Axis offered Quebec independence from English overlords. The Haida's triumph stood vindicated. Liam's pattern, born of humble harbors, had outwitted not just wolves, but human vipers, preserving the convoy's cargo for D-Day's distant shores. Ethan Roberts wheeled in on crutches from his recovery bed, clasped Liam's good hand, his limp a badge of shared survival. "You saved us twice over, Cook." He grinned through pain. Margaret attended, her presence a quiet anchor, bandaging Liam's wound with tender efficiency, the emotional scars of doubt mending in her gaze. Canada's wartime machine absorbed the blow. Hughes bound for trial in Ottawa, his network probed by RCMP shadows. But the cost lingered. Trust eroded among the ranks. Whispers of loyalty tests rippling through Halifax shipyards. Ford promoted Liam discreetly to warrant officer, a nod to his tactical eye, yet the captain's scar-twisted smile held sorrow. "War's not just steel and sea," he said. "It's the rot within." Noah returned to his farm dreams tempered by vigilance, penning reports that would bolster convoy defenses fleet-wide. For Liam, the aftermath brought somber reflection. 200 men lived because of audacity, but betrayal's shadow reminded him of war's human frailty, the line between hero and traitor as thin as Atlantic fog. Pride in Canada's unyielding stand swelled, yet bitterness tainted it. Sacrifices like Ethan's or the Montrose's lost demanded more than medals. They cried for a world rebuilt without such darkness. As the inquiry wrapped, a sealed envelope arrived for Liam from Mackenzie. Intercepted U-552 flotsam revealing Top's final log entry. Canadian ghost evaded, but the defector's kin awaits in the next pack. Hughes had a brother, unaccounted for, possibly crewing another U-boat stalking Allied routes, a vendetta poised to strike the Haida's next patrol. Liam Thompson clutched the sealed envelope in his calloused fist as the train from Ottawa pulled into Halifax Station, the rhythmic clatter of wheels fading into the familiar hum of wartime docks. It was mid-December 1942 now, the air sharp with frost and the tang of pine from nearby forests. But the chill that seeped into his bones had little to do with the weather. Mackenzie's warning burned in his mind. Hughes' brother, Pierre, a shadowy figure rumored to have slipped across the border into German-occupied territory years earlier, now potentially manning the conning tower of a fresh U-boat, U-515, whispers suggested, poised for revenge against the Canadian ghost who had foiled their pack. Liam's promotion to warrant officer felt hollow, a brass pin that couldn't shield him from the vendetta's reach. Margaret met him again at the platform, her embrace warmer this time, laced with the scent of fresh-baked bread from her family's holiday preparations, but her eyes searched his face for the shadows that lingered. "The inquiry's done," she said, linking her arm through his as they walked the snowy streets toward their flat. "Let it go, Liam. The Haida's refitting. Your next patrol's weeks away." Yet he couldn't. That night, as snow flurried against the window panes, Liam pored over the log excerpt by lamplight, the German scrawl translated starkly. Pierre's transmissions had guided U-552's initial strike, and now, with his brother captured, the siblings' fury might summon a deadlier wolf. Noah Campbell arrived unannounced, bearing a bottle of contraband rum and a dossier of his own, RCMP files on Pierre Hughes, a radical from Montreal's French separatist circles, who had vanished in 1940 after a rally decrying Canada's English war. "He's out there," Noah said, his Saskatchewan drawl edged with steel. "And if he's feeding intel to Dunitz, the next convoy's meet." Ethan Roberts joined them later, hobbling on his crutch, his leg wound a dull throb under the strain, insisting on toasting the dead before plotting their hunt. Bonds forged in the Atlantic's fury tightened anew, but suspicion's poison lingered. Could Pierre have allies in Halifax, eyes watching from the shipyards? As the men mapped crude charts on the kitchen table, Margaret hovered, her welder's hand steadying Liam's shaking ones. The group's resolve, a fragile bulwark against the encroaching dark. The hunt for Pierre Hughes escalated through the covert channels of Canada's wartime underbelly, pulling Liam deeper into a web that blurred the line between sailor and spy. Days blurred into a frenzy of shadowed meetings. In the back alleys of Dartmouth, where French-Canadian dock workers whispered of separatist cells funded by Axis Gold. At the Naval Intelligence Outpost in a nondescript warehouse, where Captain Daniel Mackenzie chain-smoked while decoding fresh Enigma intercepts hinting at U-515's position off Labrador. Liam's tactical eye, honed by his zigzag gambit, proved invaluable. He sketched evasion routes for potential patrols, predicting how Pierre might exploit convoy patterns to strike the Haida on her January sortie. "He's family to a traitor," Mackenzie growled, his Ypres limp echoing on the concrete floor. "But blood don't mean loyalty in this fight." Noah, driven by his brother's Montrose grave, infiltrated pubs frequented by Quebec expatriates. His farm boy charm extracting rumors of Pierre's radio signals bouncing from neutral Irish ports. Ethan, sidelined from duty but fierce in spirit, cross-referenced crew manifests, uncovering a suspicious transfer. A signals rating from the Haida, one Connor Wright, with ties to Montreal's radical scene, who had requested shore leave just before the battle. Paranoia festered. Liam confronted Wright in a fog-shrouded shipyard, the man's eyes darting like a cornered fox. "I lost kin to the Somme," Wright spat, denying everything, but his alibi cracked under Noah's grilling. Nights unaccounted for, a shortwave rig hidden in his quarters. Margaret, drawn into the fray despite Liam's pleas, used her dock access to tail a suspected courier. Her scarf pulled low as she dodged patrols, uncovering a cache of coded letters in a fisherman's shack. Tension coiled like a spring. The Haida's refit neared completion, her hull patched and guns oiled, but the specter of sabotage loomed, poisoned fuel lines or tampered Aztec. Liam's nights were sleepless, haunted by visions of torpedoes finding their mark, Margaret's warmth his only anchor. As Christmas Eve bells tolled from St. Mary's Basilica, the group converged on a tip. Pierre himself, smuggled ashore by a U-boat supply tender, holed up in an abandoned cannery on the Bedford Basin, plotting to rendezvous with Wright for the final betrayal. The air crackled with urgency, the war's front lines bleeding into home soil, demanding a sacrifice none had foreseen. Climax shattered the fragile holiday truce in the pre-dawn gloom of December 25th, as Liam, Noah, and Ethan stormed the cannery under cover of a blizzard, their breaths fogging in the sub-zero gale. Wind howled through rusted walls like banshee wails, snow whipping their faces as they breached the door, flashlights piercing the murk to reveal Pierre Hughes, tall and gaunt, his submariner's sweater marked with U-515 insignia, hunched over a humming transmitter spitting coordinates for the Haida's impending patrol. "You ghosts again," Pierre sneered in accented English, his hand inching toward a Mauser on the crate beside him, eyes burning with the zeal of a man who saw Canada's war as imperial chains. Connor Wright stood frozen nearby, guilt etching his face, a stack of betrayal maps fluttering in the draft. Liam lunged first, tackling Pierre amid a roar of fury, the two men crashing into shelves that splintered like matchwood, spilling tinned fish and rusted tools. Noah grappled with Wright, fists flying in a brutal exchange that bloodied both, while Ethan, crutch discarded, manned the door against reinforcements. Shadowy figures glimpsed through the storm, likely Pierre's Quebec cell. Gunfire cracked, a bullet grazing Noah's shoulder, hot pain blooming as he wrestled the Mauser away. But Pierre fought like a demon, his knife slicing Liam's thigh in a shallow gash that burned like fire. "For Samuel!" Liam growled, pinning the traitor. Memories of the Montrose's screams fueling his strength. Chaos peaked as the transmitter sparked under Ethan's boot. Arcs of electricity illuminating the fray, coordinates lost to static. But not before Pierre's broadcast pierced the ether, a final hail to U-515. Ghost located, strike Haida at dawn. Sirens wailed from the harbor, RCMP and naval MPs converging on Mackenzie's alert, the blizzard turning the cannery into a frozen battlefield. In the melee's heart, as Pierre slumped defeated, Wright confessed in sobs, blackmailed by family ties, feeding scraps to save his own skin. If you're still here with them in this final storm, subscribe, so the unsung battles on home shores live on. Blood slicked the floor, bonds tested to breaking, yet the trio stood victorious. The vendetta's blade turned aside, though the cost etched deeper scars on souls already weary. Resolution dawned with the blizzard's retreat, sunlight glinting off the basin's ice as MPs hauled Pierre and Wright away in irons, their confessions unraveling a nascent spy ring that stretched to Montreal's backrooms. The naval inquiry, swift and unyielding, cleared the Haida's crew, Liam's wound stitched in the base hospital where Margaret kept vigil, her hands gentle on his fevered brow. Captain Elias Ford arrived by launch, his scar livid against the pallor of exhaustion, clasping Liam's shoulder with rare warmth. Twice the savior, Thompson. First the sea, now the shadows. Promotions rippled through the ranks. Noah to full lieutenant, his shoulder bandaged but spirit unbroken. Ethan, cleared for light duty, vowing to walk unaided by spring. Canada's intelligence apparatus absorbed the blow. RCMP raids netting sympathizers across the Maritimes, bolstering convoy security with new codes inspired by Liam's patterns. The 200 men of RCX-42, their lives preserved, became legend in briefings, tanks rolling toward Normandy thanks to a cook's hunch and a winter's grim pursuit. Yet emotional consequences weighed heavy. Liam stared at the harbor from his hospital bed, guilt mingling with relief for the innocents dragged into treason's wake. Margaret's promise ring now a vow renewed in quiet talks of post-war farms. Noah penned letters to his family, the Montrose's loss avenged in measure, while Ethan shared rum-soaked tales in the ward, laughter brittle but real. Ford's toast echoed in memory, to the rot rooted out, but war's realism tempered triumph. The Atlantic still claimed ships weakly, and Pierre's cell hinted at deeper fractures in national unity. Pride in Canada's mosaic resilience swelled, her sons from prairies to ports weaving a defiant tapestry, but bitterness lingered like frost. Sacrifices demanded vigilance eternal, heroes haunted by what-ifs. As the Haida steamed out for trials, her silhouette sharp against the winter sea, the crew stood taller, the Zigzag not just a maneuver but a mindset against all foes. In the hush of recovery, as Liam boarded the Haida for her shakedown cruise, a urgent signal from Mackenzie arrived via semaphore. U-515, guided by Pierre's last words, had been sighted shadowing a supply run to Iceland. Her captain, a protege of Top, bearing a grudge etched in Kriegsmarine ink, with rumors of a boarding party including escaped Axis agents from Canadian POW camps, poised to hijack an escort and turn the wolves inward.